It's summer 1955 on the old Great Central line from Sheffield to Retford. We join a double-headed train of empties heading south from Sheffield and back to the collieries of the South Yorkshire Joint Railway. Coal was king, and in 1955, 70% of all the male workers in Dinnington and Maltby were miners, digging a record 1.3 million tonnes of the black gold from beneath the earth. These old wooden coal wagons had only a manual handbrake, and something this long took some stopping, so trains like this were restricted to as little as 35 miles an hour. Our train is headed by a brace of J11s designed by John G. Robinson for use on the Great Central Railway. These versatile 060 tender engines were good steamers and were very popular with their crews. Double heading of smaller locomotives was commonplace until the more powerful 280 locos were brought into regular use. But when a colliery was running low on empty wagons, it risked having to stop production, so any available motive power would be pressed into service to avoid a backlog. When the system was nationalised in 1948, British Railways inherited around 1 million wagons, and around half of those had previously been private owner wagons. Despite their best efforts, replacement of stock would take many years to complete, so seeing coal wagons resplendent with the name of their home colliery was commonplace until the end of the decade, and some survived even longer. Such was the scale of the problem that many collieries kept their own wagon repair facilities and charged the servicing back to BR. At Dinnington, one of Maltby's wagons is being lifted using the shear legs to service the wheel sets. Upon arriving at Dinnington Colliery, the train is cut, and a rake of wagons collect a brake van before heading further up the line to Maltby Colliery. Meanwhile, the Dinnington empties are drawn into the reception sidings. (62843) doesn't do the return trip empty-handed though. She grabs a rake of loaded wagons and heads back to Sheffield. Collieries were not part of the National Railway system, and so all of them had at least one engine. This Andrew Barclay 040 was typical of NCB engines, and many of them were kept in splendid condition by their proud loco crews. She pulls off the shed at the start of a very busy shift. The first job is to collect a rake of trucks containing waste spoil. This was unwanted material dug out to get to the coal, and once at the surface, it was moved around in privately owned wagons that were for internal use only, so ownership of these wagons didn't transfer to British Railways. The spoil was offloaded at the far end of the colliery site, most of it destined for the huge pit tips that dominated the landscape of the area. After leaving the spoil to be unloaded, she heads back to the pit head. Here she shunts wagons through to be loaded under the screens. As each cut of wagons was loaded, They would then be shunted into full train loads and placed in the departure sidings, ready for a British Railways engine to take them on to their destination. She then goes back to take another cut of empties, collects a brake van for the outward bound train, and finally it's back to her shed for a break. The sidings were grouped into departure sidings for loaded wagons on the British Railway side and reception sidings on the colliery side for the returning empties. A Gresley 02-280 heavy freight locomotive heads towards Worksop with a loaded train of coal from Maltby Colliery. Here we see some of the newer steel wagons introduced by BR. She waits at the signal for a Retford-bound autocoach service to clear the junction before leaving the branch line, bound for Worksop. We can see there are many different grades of coal and processed coke, each with a different purpose, and probably a different destination. A light engine draws into Worksop. It's just started its turn from Retford's old Great Central shed at Thrumpton Road. Unsurprisingly then, it's another John Robinson design, the Great Central Railway's take on the 280 heavy freight, the Class 04. Originally built in 1918, 63637 was allocated to Retford Thrumpton Great Central Shed in 1939 and regularly worked at Dinnington Colliery right up until her withdrawal in 1962. She was scrapped at Doncaster after 44 years, 2 months and 9 days of loyal service. Dinnington works the Barnsley seam, which produced excellent quality coke from the ovens at Dinnington. 4,000 tonnes a week was sent straight to the Sheffield Gas Company, who used it to generate town gas for the Sheffield area. The Nottinghamshire coalfield produced a different type of coal from that found in the Barnsley seam, and this train from Bolsover Colliery is taking coal straight to the port of Immingham for export. Headed up by yet another 280 heavy freight locomotive, and this time it's a Mansfield-based Stanier 8F that's in charge. She waits at Shire Oaks East Junction for the Sheffield-bound 04 to clear the line, but there's a passenger train pulling into Kiveton Oaks. The signalman takes the decision to route the Immingham-bound train into the Worksop sidings, because, although these are more modern steel-bodied wagons, they still don't have vacuum brakes fitted, and so are speed restricted and will hold the faster passenger service up. The D11 director sets off with a 3-coach Sheffield to Cleethorpes service. She overtakes the coal train waiting in the loop and pulls into the station at Worksop. Once the passenger train is clear of the platform, the signalman at Worksop station box clears the line and gives the 8F the right of way so she can carry on her way to Immingham. The mighty Barnsley seam was one of the largest and thickest coal seams in the area. It tilts down into the earth from Barnsley in the north, where it was very close to the surface, all the way to Lincoln, where it was over a kilometre down. The collieries of Sheffield and Barnsley, where the coal was nearer the surface, often produced excellent house coal, but unlike the very deep coal mined in Dinnington, it was not as good as being baked into coke. This pick-up goods train out of Sheffield has a handful of wagons loaded with various grades of house coals for the coal dealers in Kiveton Oaks and Worksop. The train draws into the station and disconnects the brake van. The secondary shunt-on signal gives the driver permission to pass the mainline signal at danger and proceed to shunt back onto the yard sidings. The first move is to drop the 2 vans and 2 loaded coal wagons that are staying at Kiveton. The train then draws forward, clears the points, and backs down onto the two vans that are leaving Kiverton. Then the same again, but this time for the empty coal wagons. A Midland 4F heads up the train, and with an 060 wheel set, she can negotiate the tight corners on the points into the yard. Finally, we pull the loaded wagons out of the siding and back them onto the siding next to the coal office. The local coal dealer would have at least two grades of house coal. One of them would be a smokeless grade, such as anthracite, a house-grade coke, or briquettes made from crushed cokes. They would buy their coal from coal merchants, who in turn bought it direct from the collieries. The movement is complete, so she collects the brake van and heads on down the line to Worksop.